When I was a teenager, the story of Mary and Martha was one of my favorite Bible stories because I thought it meant that Jesus said it was better to be engaged in intellectual pursuits than to do the dishes. If Mary had chosen the better part by sitting at Jesus' feet listening to him, then surely I was choosing the better part when I quickly said excuse me after meals and disappeared to some far corner of the house or yard with my book, so no one could ask me to help clean up. And I still appreciate that what Jesus is saying to Mary and Martha was radical for that time. He is giving Mary permission to sit and participate in conversation rather than running around tending to the needs of the men. He is saying her worth is not measured by her cooking and cleaning. The expectation of everyone, including Mary and Martha, when Martha asks Jesus to tell Mary to come and help her in the kitchen, is that Jesus would do exactly that. The role expectation for women at that time was that they would perform all the domestic duties while leaving the men to enjoy conversation. And Mary is breaking all the rules by sitting down to listen to that conversation rather than helping her sister in the kitchen. And Jesus says, let her do that. However, as I've gotten older, my engagement with this story has gotten a little more complex. You see, someone must do the dishes, someone must take the trash out, someone must prepare the food, someone must wash the clothes. And as much as I keep praying that a cleaning fairy is suddenly going to come in the night and miracles are going to happen while we sleep, these tasks do not do themselves. Either my wife or I has to do them or they just accumulate. And life is better with clean dishes, food on the table, no icky garbage smell coming from under the kitchen sink, and clean clothes to wear. And I've also been blessed over the years to receive the gift of hospitality. And I am now wise enough to know that a delicious meal, well presented on a beautifully laid table with great conversation, doesn't just happen. Someone has cleaned and cooked and decorated to make that possible. Someone will have to clear away the dishes afterwards, too. None of my friends or family are wealthy enough to have employees who do that sort of thing for them. So I know that when I receive the gift of such a meal, someone has chosen to spend time and energy and money to offer it. The careful thought and effort that such a meal takes is part of the gift one receives when invited to share it. And it's part of the gift that Martha is giving Jesus in this story. One of the things we know about Jesus is that he often surprised people by his willingness to take the servant role. Jesus didn't act like a high and mighty person who was too good to help get the harvest in or put food on the table. He never said, I'm the Son of God, you should wait on me. Instead, you might remember how Jesus bent down and washed the feet of his disciples, an act that only a servant or a slave would do. So I cannot imagine that Jesus is putting down Martha's hospitality or suggesting in this story that it is wrong to want to serve food to a guest. In fact, in a twist that we often miss because our context is so different from first century Palestine, Jesus is actually doing something rather radical by accepting Martha's hospitality. While there is a story in John's Gospel, which has a Mary and Martha in the village of Bethany, along with their recently deceased brother Lazarus that Jesus brings back to life, it might obscure the meaning of this story if we assume that these are the same people. The village here is unnamed, and it's quite possible that Mary and Martha were common names. And you see, one of the kickers of this story is that it presents that Martha owns the house. There is no mention of a brother, just two sisters living in a house owned by one of them. And in that time and place, a female-headed household was exceptional. That the home Jesus chooses to stay in when he comes to the village as Martha's home is actually remarkable. I don't think Jesus is rejecting Martha's hospitality. Quite the contrary, he's risking her reputation, his reputation and theirs, to accept it. So then, What if we are meant to hear this story in conjunction with the story that immediately precedes it in Luke's Gospel? The one we heard last week, the story of the Good Samaritan. What if these two stories hold up for us a dynamic tension in the life of faith? And what if they are both stories about remembering important things and the distractions that can keep us from doing the things that matter most? In the story of the Good Samaritan, you might remember, two important men, a priest and a Levite, are busy with their lives and their work, and so they see a man who has fallen among thieves, and they cross the road and go by on the other side, rather than helping him. They have places to be and things to do. And last Sunday, Julie told us about a contemporary story about how some students studying for ministry did the same thing when they were told to hurry to another building to preach a sermon about the Good Samaritan. They actually walked by an actor pretending to be a wounded person. The one who stops to help in the Good Samaritan is the outsider, the person you least expect, the person you might least want to be the one who offers you help, the Samaritan. He is the one who gets his hands dirty with the nitty-gritty work of tending wounds and helping the injured man to find food and safe shelter. The reminder in that story is that our call to love one another as neighbors involves action. Actions like helping someone who is hurt by the side of the road, even when we are in a rush to be someplace else. By contrast, in this week's story, Martha appears on the surface to be doing what the Good Samaritan story recommends. She's taking care of everyone's basic needs. In fact, her efforts to feed and take care of everyone have left her frazzled, and she wants her sister to help with that. Martha appears to be the one loving her neighbors in this story, except perhaps she is not. I don't know if any of you have ever experienced this, but often when we have invited guests over to our house for something, there is this moment in the preparation process when I get to wishing that I hadn't invited anyone. I get flustered, there's food that still isn't cooked, there are vegetables to be chopped, the cake needs icing, the extra chairs need to be pulled up from the basement and vacuumed because they're covered in cat hair because it's the cat's favorite place to hang out. You know the picture. And in those moments, hospitality gives way to stress. I can very easily lose sight of the loving intention with which we invited people over in the first place. And I might even lose sight of the desire to spend time with family and friends and just wish to get this all over with. And it's often in that moment that my wife and I start fighting. So I wonder if Martha felt a little bit like that. I wonder if her desire to host Jesus and his disciples has disintegrated, as she has become worried about all of the details of the hospitality. I wonder if she is feeling more resentful than loving. Like the priest and the Levite in the Good Samaritan story, Martha is too busy to attend to what really matters. In this case, spending time with her guests. One of the things I love about my book club is that we have norms around hospitality that include not looking under anyone's couch, welcoming the presence of people's kids who want to grab a snack before bed, or pets who demand attention, and celebrating that grocery stores and bakeries make good snack food. Yes, sometimes someone makes something delicious for our gatherings, but other times we eat store-bought veggie trays, donuts, a DQ blizzard cake, or cheese and crackers with appreciation. One time, when someone's ring rolled under a couch, the host recruited one of her children to retrieve it because vacuuming under couches is not assumed. My grandmother would be horrified, but it works for us. These norms are not about not valuing our book club. On the contrary, they are about trying to make hosting enjoyable rather than a burden, since we all have busy, often unpredictable lives, and we want to have it be fun to be together rather than worrying if someone might notice a little bit of dust. What really matters in any given moment may be different, but I think it all comes back to what is said earlier in the chapter of Luke's Gospel about the way we inherit life. You must love God with all your heart, with all your being, with all your strength, and with all your mind. and love your neighbor as yourself. Sometimes the act of feeding someone, of tending their wounds, of taking care of their basic needs is an act of profound love. It is a deeply important thing. It is more important than the pursuit of religious purity, of business as usual, of any of the things on our to-do list. Such is the case when the Samaritan stops to tend the wounded man. At the same time, worrying about what we are going to feed people or how much cat hair is on the sofa or who will do the dishes can also become a stumbling block for love. We become so busy with the details of hospitality or housekeeping that the purpose of hospitality or housekeeping begins to elude us. We forget that it is all about love. Love for God, love for our neighbors, love for ourselves. Whether it is for guests that we have invited or for the people we live with, cleaning the toilet, folding the laundry, or changing the sheets on the bed are opportunities to show love for ourselves and for others. Teresa of Calcutta's motto was, "Do small things with great love." And I think that's great advice when we are trying to discern whether we should wash the dishes or phone a friend, whether we should stop to help a child who has skinned his knee or get to work on time, whether we should invite friends round for supper or enjoy a quiet evening at home, whether to take the dog for a walk or spend time in prayer and reflection, whether we should take a bath or clean the bathtub. Sometimes it's obvious what the better part is. Other times it's not. It depends on the context. It depends on the day. It depends on the state of our hearts in the moment. Yet if we can remember, insofar as it is possible, to make these choices with love. Love for God, love for self, love for neighbors. Then we will be on the right track. Even if that means that we find ourselves doing things that defy expectations and break social rules, like Mary, Martha, and Jesus do in this story. Thanks be to God. Amen.